I'm promising you, I feel so good about the fact that it's Friday today. I don't know why. I love the end of a matter better than the beginning. End of the matter. The matter here is the week. Yes, I know another week will begin in a couple of days, but today we rest our heads, don't we? And for those of you that do not rest on Fridays, you belong to a WhatsApp group I am not a part of. Whatever your plans are for Friday, I do hope that VOP 96.1 FM is a part of it. My name is Chinwe Blessing, welcoming you officially to Legally Speaking. So when we hear legal, it sounds very serious now, doesn't it? Well, legal stuff are very important stuff and serious stuff, but of course we like to get into it, get you educated and informed about some of the things that we might not know about on everyday basis. All right, now in the course of today's show, we're going to be looking at life behind bars. Not bars like MI or Tupac would, spit. We mean like the bars those iron bars that once they pull them behind you, it's a different world. We want to see what that world is like. I happen to be having a conversation with a lawyer, an ESQ, an Esquire. I remember being so young and I wanted so bad to have the Esquire thing behind my name. So bad. God knows why he didn't put it there. I might have been, making a lot of trouble simply because I was a lawyer. But Victor Izebor, he is a legal practitioner and he's been that since 2018. Yes, he happens to be someone who fights for human rights and justice. He gives legal aid through his organization. And in case you're wondering what legal aid is, you're going to find out the moment I turn on his mic, which is in 3, 2, 1. Hi, Victor.
Hi,
How are you feeling today?
I'm good.
First question I ask people that sit across of me is, how much water are you drinking in this hot sun?
A lot.
When was the last time you had a bottle of water?
Few minutes ago.
Good. Because if you had said an hour, I would have had problems. And you're listening to me, when was the last time you had a bottle, not a sip, a bottle of water? Because this heat is enough to make, the one mandate of the president not stand. Let the poor breathe. This heat is choking us. Now, you run an NGO.
Yeah.
And in that NGO, you educate people about, their rights and what the law is and how it affects them. You also, do humanitarian work and justice and legal aid. When I hear legal aid, I think about suits. So that's where we're going to start this conversation from. Did you become a lawyer because you watch Suits?
No. I always had the intention to be a lawyer way before I started seeing suits.
So, but you did see Suits.
Yeah, I did.
Did it contribute? Did you imagine yourself a Harvey Specter or a Mike?
More of a mic.
Really? Not
Yeah.
a Louis lead?
Nah.
Louis is great. Okay, but then your journey through being a lawyer, what made you decide that, I'm going to use being a lawyer to actually fight for people, even though it means, doing work that might not make me very rich?
To be honest, it's always something that has been there. I remember when I was in uni, I had the prison visit with one of my lecturers back then, and we went to, I think that was the Shagam Correctional Center. We visited the place and we saw the deplorable state it was in. We saw the amount of inmates that were there. It was about twice the size the prison could hold. You could see people that wanted to sleep had to stand to sleep. People didn't even have like a mattress to sleep. People were sleeping on the bare floor, and one of the problems that they had was they didn't have lawyers to represent them. They didn't have enough legal representation. A lot of them were still awaiting trial. I mean, the majority of them were still awaiting trial. And, it was just something that piqued my interest, that as much as I would want to make money off being a lawyer, I'd also like to help people, that will require these services to try and help decongest the prisons. Because, I mean, listening to the stories of a lot of the people in these correctional facilities, a lot of them aren't supposed to be there. A lot of them are wrongly incarcerated. I mean, it's a lot of factors contributing to why they were there. you know. So I just decided that I would help them out whenever I become a lawyer.
Okay. Now, what's the saddest story you've heard of someone that's behind bars? Like the most mind-breaking story, heartbreaking story you heard?
I think that's the story I heard in February. So on February 20th of this year, my organization, Sterling Humanitarian Foundation, in commemoration of the World Day of Social Justice, visited the Suleja prison, or the Suleja Correctional Facility, and we had helped to secure the release of some inmates, and we also went in with the team. We went as an organization, and we listened to some stories. And one of the stories that stood out for me was the story of a young lady. So she had been dating this guy for a while, right? And he has been giving her money. He had given her his ATM card. He had given her the pin to his ATM card. She has been withdrawing money, staying with him, over an extended period of time. And she's a graduate, by the way. And the guy said, "Oh, I would like to marry you." And she goes, "Oh, she's not interested in marrying him. She likes how things currently are, but she doesn't want to get married to him." And the guy got angry because he's been spending money on her. He had invested in quotes in the relationship, and now that he wants to get married and seal the deal, she is reluctant to get married. So he got the police involved. He told the police that she had been stealing from him, and she stole his ATM card. She had withdrew multiple sums at different times from his ATM card, and he would like a refund of that amount. How much was it? It was 150,000 naira.
Cumulatively.
Yeah.
That's the money he's been spending on her.
Yeah.
That he wanted as return of investment.
And she's been there for about 2 months. She's not had any legal representation. She's not been charged to court. She's just there waiting trial. So, these are the kind of stories you hear every day from Nigerian correctional facilities. And I think it's important to point out that the Nigerian correctional facilities were not built with women in mind. If you look at the statistics, we have less than 4% of the inmate population as women. Most of the skill acquisition programs in the Nigerian correctional facilities are geared mostly towards men as opposed to women. And in fact, it will interest you to know that in the whole of Nigeria, there's only one correctional facility that is made for women, which is in Kirikiri. Every other correctional facility across the country was generally made for men. And then over time, as women started to populate these correctional facilities, they will carve out a small place for them. Speaking of that, it will also interest you to know that about 95% of the women who are in correctional facilities are of childbearing age. So you can imagine that when it's that time of the month, there's no medical facility, there's no
provision for toiletries
and all of that. So you can imagine how harrowing an experience it would be for them. So this is where we do step in every now and then, to try and aid these people in correctional facilities.
Now, you kept mentioning legal representation and how there is a very high shortage of it in prisons, in most correctional facilities. We are going to come to why they're called correctional facilities as opposed to prisons and what the difference is. But back to legal representation, how aware are people that they actually need this legal representation, and how accessible is it?
I think everybody knows that when you go to prison, you require the services of a lawyer, right? So the problem here is how many people are going to dedicate their time to, one person's cause and following through that process till it's done. Because on one end, you have the prosecution, which is usually a representative of the state, who is supposed to prosecute whoever it is that in quotes has been accused of committing a crime. On the other end, you have somebody who is supposed to represent the defendant or the accused, right? So I think everybody knows that you need a lawyer. Everybody knows that. The problem is first of all, there's the thing with being able to afford a lawyer, right? not a lot of people can afford a lawyer. I mean, to be honest, if for example the story I just gave, if I have 150,000 naira to pay that man, there will be no need to call a lawyer, right? I'll just pay him off and I'll go. And you can imagine that the cost of hiring a lawyer is going to be way more than the 150,000. The case is going to drag on for a long time, right? So those are where we have issues. Not a lot of people have that time to come and give, and I'm speaking in the pro bono sense, right? Free legal services to these people. So
is there a way to get affordable legal services for most of these people that have found themselves in quite unfortunate instances? I remember you mentioning, some of these people were even wrongly incarcerated. It's not like they're supposed to be in prisons anyway. They're wrongly being put there. Is there a way that maybe the government or good-willing Nigerians can just come together and say, oh, we're trying to see how we can subsidize legal aid for these individuals?
Oh, yeah. So originally, the law makes a provision, right? There's what we call the Legal Aid Council. Legal Aid Council is supposed to provide legal services to the Nigerian populace when they've been accused of a crime and they cannot afford legal representation, right? But we have an issue with overpopulation. Take, for example, Suleja Correctional Facility, and I keep using that because that was my most recent visit. Suleja Correctional Facility was built sometime in the 1940s or so, and it was built to accommodate 250 inmates. As at the time we visited Suleja Correctional Facility, they had 496 inmates.
Twice the amount.
Twice the amount that facility is supposed to hold. And same can be said for almost all the correctional facilities across the country. Now, how many lawyers can we continue to churn out to represent people? Because crimes happen on a daily basis, so it's really hard. So the best way right now, in practice rather, is for people to support NGOs like us who are providing these people with affordable legal. For the most part, we do provide them with free legal representation. So it's to provide us, with funding or donations in whatever way they can, so that we can support these people. Sometimes it's not even just funding. These people also require our support in terms of donation of food items, toiletries. Sometimes they just need a warm face to see them. Once in a while, I think I would advise people to just visit correctional facilities.
Can people just randomly visit correctional facilities and interface with this incarcerated?
Yes, you can schedule a visit and see them. You can always schedule a visit and see them.
Is it advisable? People will be wondering, is it safe for me to go to a prison just to visit people that have been... these people have already been tried and...
So I think that's also a misconception. There's a misconception that most people who are in prison, or it's called now correctional facilities, are people who have been tried and convicted. Now, let me give you an interesting fact. That's at 12th of February 2024, 70% of inmates in Nigerian correctional facilities are still awaiting trial.
So what's holding the line? What is holding the line? Why have they not been tried?
Some of them don't have legal representation. Sometimes the cases are dragging on in court due to lack of diligent prosecution. It's a lot of issues. It's a lot of issues, really.
You mentioned people, donating food items and whatnot. You have visited a number of correctional facilities. What is it like there? What is their feeding like? Is it... I know there's a mindset that, it's bad. But how bad is bad?
Really bad. Really, really bad. I remember that last month when we were there, and the person in charge was telling us that the budget for an inmate's meal is 150 naira.
For a day or for one meal?
For a meal.
150 naira.
for a meal.
In this economic situation.
That's just to put things in perspective. 150 naira.
Okay. Let's rights.
Yes.
What are the rights of their family members? What are the rights of who can visit? Can anybody just bring food to anybody? Are there procedures? Can particularly family members see, different people? I remember seeing a Nollywood film just a few weeks ago, trying to remember the title, but it had something to do with prisons. And one of the actors was an inmate. They're like, oh, he can only see his lawyer, he can't see his family members. Are there situations like that in real life?
So it depends on a lot of variables, right? So for example, if you've been charged to court and you're supposed to be remanded, there are certain situations where the judge can put some stringent conditions, right? So I mean, I know in the news sometimes you hear that your passports are to be seized. Only your lawyer is allowed to visit you. There are certain people that they will put in like in a different cell, right? That's different from the others. So it depends on a lot of things, but generally, you're allowed to get visits. Your family is allowed to see you. People can come and visit you. But the problem is, in practice, first of all, there's no space for you. I mean, I'm pretty sure we've seen like a lot of movies where you have like a glass and
someone is sitting on the other side.
Yeah, and it's just that doesn't happen in practice in Nigeria. Sorry to break it to you. So it's literally just a small room and it's an open space. It's either of those two.
So if it's a small room, paint a picture, please, in our heads. I'm really very curious. So a small room, say like half the size of this studio.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's basically just you and the person you came to visit, or it's also crowded?
It's hardly ever you and the person that's coming to visit you. Usually you have people from the correctional service that are there with you. You hardly ever get some private time.
What of spouses? Do they get conjugal visits? Say somebody is supposed to be there for like 5-7 years. Do they get their spouse to come over for, conjugal visits? Do they get that?
Nah, that's not applicable in Nigeria.
Why? Is it legally not, or is just not in practice? Is it that on paper, both on paper and in reality, you just don't get
So
it?
there's no provision for like conjugal visits
At all?
No.
Now, you see why you shouldn't be committing crime and finding yourself behind bars? Because, I mean, there's no food. Your spouse can't come visit you. It's not even an issue of, you have to have a wife, or you have to have a husband. Is that you don't get conjugal visits at all. Visits
are just visits.
It's just plain. There's no privacy. You can't have that.
Nah.
Life after prison. Let's touch on that briefly. Life after prison. Are there certain jobs that, ex-cons cannot apply to? They cannot. Ex-cons, ex-felons, ex-prison people. Generally, are there certain jobs they cannot apply for? Or is it, in Nigeria, anything goes?
Okay. So the truth is, generally, there's no law prohibiting ex-convicts from working, right? But there are certain places where they would ask you, for example, if you want to become president of Nigeria, right? They would ask you if you've been convicted of a crime before, right? So
I mean, we've had an ex as a president before.
I'm not going to comment on that.
I'm just saying, if we've had that, have you seen situations where anybody is like, I need a legal representation. I need legal representation because, I'm out now. I'm trying to get my life back on track, and I'm having a hard time doing that.
So what really just happens is, for the most part, when you try to apply for a job, there's usually a due diligence. there's usually a due diligence that most companies would run and would ask for. They'll ask you questions, right? They'll ask you questions like if you're affiliated to a politically exposed person, if you've been convicted of a crime in Nigeria or elsewhere, you know. So after doing that, people can decide that they will not want to hire an ex-convict. It's just the stigma that goes with it.
How do you then advise that, these individuals rise above the stigma, get over it, and, find life after prison?
So that's why most correctional facilities have skill acquisition centers, right? So they teach these people how to work with their hands, do one or two jobs so that they can fend for themselves, right? So for example, if you learn how to be a good carpenter, you learn carpentry while you're in prison, while you're incarcerated. When you come out, nobody's going to come and ask you,
why did you open this shop?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking for a good carpenter, you're recommending, and I can see the work you've done and it's nice. I'm not going to come and ask you if you're a convict, so you're not going to work for me. It would just be me discriminating. If you can do the job, then that's fine.
Then get the job done.
Yeah.
If you could prefer a solution to the overpopulation of prisons, what would you say that the solution should be?
Off the top of my head, I think the first thing that the government needs to do is to move the Nigerian Correctional Service to the Ministry of Justice, right? So that the Ministry of Justice is able to monitor and evaluate what really goes on in these correctional facilities. So the Ministry of Justice can also prefer legal aid to people who have been wrongly incarcerated or people who have been incarcerated without legal representation. That's one. Two, I also think that the Ministry of Justice can also help to speed up criminal cases, right? If they can abridge the time used in conducting and hearing criminal cases, it would help to, decongest the prisons, because the bulk of the population of the people in prisons are people who are awaiting trial, and it's not a good look that you are awaiting trial and you're there for 2 years, 3 years, and at the end of the day you're charged to court, find out there's no substantial evidence proving that you committed that crime, and then you're discharged.
Is there any sort of compensation that the government gives for wrongfully imprisoned people in Nigeria? Because we know that outside the shores of this country, in some sane crimes, you'd be compensated. They say, oh, we did you this wrong, you're wrongfully imprisoned. Here's a couple of hundred, millions of dollars or pounds, and just try to get your life back on track and see what you can do with the rest of it.
So that the issue of compensation is at the discretion of the courts, right? Is at the discretion of the courts, and first of all, it's even at the discretion of who the defendant or who the accused is. So you have to ask the courts for damages, right? So when you ask the court will now discretionally award damages if they feel that you're entitled to some sort of damages.
We've heard very gory stories. I've personally read newspaper articles, read some novels based on people's experiences about some of the things that happen in these correctional facilities. In fact, there are certain correctional facilities that are very popular for some of the activities that happen. You hear organ harvesting, human trafficking, because there are way too many people. Anything can be done. Our data system in Nigeria is not really very apt. It's not something you could, it's not apt, right? So have you come in contact in your practice? Have you come in contact with any of such stories, heard stories, or seen people that are going through some kind of medical challenge and they're there and there's nothing that can really be done for them?
Medical challenge, yes. First of all, like I said, the Nigerian correctional facilities weren't built for women, and because they're in the minority, less than 4% of the total population.
Mm-hmm.
There's no adequate provision for them, right? And for the most part, it's really hard feeding the amount of inmates who are in these correctional facilities. You have provision for 250, you have to feed 500. Where's the
rest
balance going to come from? So you already have a problem with feeding them, and this most of the times the budgets are really slim. I'll give you an example. Suleja Correctional Facility, and I keep using that because that's my most recent visit. They haven't received any allocation since November 2023. So right now they don't know, or they're not sure of when the next money is going to come in from. It's just NGOs and individuals who have been supporting them. There's no provision for medical supplies. It's NGOs that come in and give off these medical supplies. It's individuals, NGOs that come in, drop off toiletries, and whatever it is that they require for their daily use.
Now, I mean, these NGOs, are there so many of them? Are they active in most of the prisons that we have in the country, or are they really very, very short? Is there a very short supply of that? And how can people, get more involved in helping the inmates that are in these correctional facilities, especially the ones that shouldn't be there?
There are not a lot of NGOs in this space. It's a very challenging thing. It's a lot. It takes a lot to go to these places, hear these stories, take on these cases, represent them in court, and see to it that justice is undoubtedly done, right? So there's not a lot of NGOs in this space. People generally can visit prisons. I mean, I usually encourage people to visit prisons. It's a go outside and touch the grass type of situation, so you see what it's like when you commit crimes or when you're wrongfully incarcerated, and you see what life is like, right? And it sort of gives you a true picture of what your country is like. I remember when Nelson Mandela got out of prison, one of the things he said was, if you really want to know the true state of your nation, it's not by how your nation treats its highly placed citizens, how it treats the lowest placed citizens, which are the prisoners, which are the people who have been incarcerated, which are the people who have been convicted, and you see that the standard of living is subpar. It's really terrible. So people can actually go to these places and donate items, or if you're interested in helping NGOs like us who provide legal representation, legal aid, they can always join us as volunteers. They can always donate to us. They can always contribute to our campaigns. We're currently running a campaign now on human rights education, so we're trying to educate people on what their rights are, as enshrined in Chapter 4 of the 1999 Constitution. So, yeah. I
mean, as in the course of your work, you do a lot of pro bono work.
Yeah.
How do you fund your work? Because, I mean, there's a reason legal representation is expensive. It's because law is not very easily, So how do you fund it?
So we started off by funding it ourselves. For the few of us that started it when we got registered in 2022, we started funding it ourselves, and as time progressed, we started getting donations from people, from corporate organizations, and that's how we've been running it since then. And with the help of a lot of volunteers who are willing to work pro bono as well, we're pushing it.
Okay, well, the challenges, what kind of challenges have you faced, like interfacing with inmates? I'm sure even like outside the correctional facilities, or outside even working with the inmates. Let's put it this way: what's the most challenging case you have picked up? You've picked, and when I say challenge in this situation, the inmates that you were trying to help was the person giving you problem. not not the courts, not the officers. Was the inmates that was just
So generally, we've never had an experience with a challenging
inmate. Oh.
Because the truth is, by the time you visit like this correctional facilities, you're there for a while. You've seen how things are. You're prone to cooperate with whoever it is that's providing you with legal service. I don't think it's a rare occurrence which hasn't happened to us yet.
Who then have you had challenges interfacing with in the course of your work?
To be honest, I think one of our biggest challenges is dealing with the correctional facility as a whole, or the Nigerian Correctional Service as a whole.
Like as an institution?
As an institution, right? Because it's like I said earlier on, before we started, before going to the studio, the major reason why the Nigerian prisons stopped being called the prisons and started being called the Nigerian Correctional Facility was to show the true essence of what they are. They're supposed to be correctional facilities. When people commit crimes, is said to be a deviation from the norm. You're not doing what is considered as the normal thing to be done in society, right? And when you go there, the essence of you being in a correctional facility is one, to deter you and to deter other people from committing crimes, because in this case your human rights, your right to freedom of movement and personal liberty is now being restrained, right, subject to the limitations placed by the law. And you're supposed to have like a counseling service, because the truth is a lot of people go into these correctional facilities, right, and after a while you're out, you come out, it's hard to get a job. You've been in a life of crime for 10 years. That's the only thing you've known for the most part of your life. And I'm coming out now, you want me to go and do a petty job that's not going to pay me 1/4 of what I was making in a month, right? So one of the things that I'm supposed to do is to try and get proper guidance and counseling psychologists who are to work with these inmates and rehabilitate them. Also try and make sure that people are learning skills, not just the conventional carpentry, sewing. I mean, all of that. We're moving into a digital age. It's about time we started teaching people some IT skills. But putting it in the Nigerian context, that's a very far-fetched thing. But that's something that should be done, right? People are now learning a lot of more IT skills and getting international jobs. At this point, we should also be considering that for our correctional facilities. Also, there's the issue with how inmates are being treated, right? And sometimes I really can't blame the institution, because what's the budgetary allocation for the Nigerian correctional facility? It's not much to write home about. So it just trickles down from the top. There's not enough money to run the place, and now you're expecting me to run it at optimal level, keep these people under tight security morning, afternoon and night, cover for logistics, because logistics is a very expensive component in the Nigerian Correctional Service. Every day they have to take people to court. So you imagine, out of the 496 people, 30% has been or have been convicted, right? And you're taking the 70% to court every day. You can imagine how much it would cost. And every time they have to go to court, they have to take out an escort, they have to take out a van.
Absolutely.
So it's a lot of money. So it also trickles down into how, they're being treated, how they are being fed, the deplorable state. There's no bed, you will hardly find like a fan, talk more of an air condition in the Nigerian correctional facilities. So those are challenges.
Just don't get into a life of crime, I guess. So a final question I've got for you. What's your success story, the one that you're most proud of? You look back and you're like, oh, this thing is worth it because, we went through this one, we got this one out. Or whatever your reasons are.
I think the NGO as a whole is a success story for me. Being able to help people in the little way that we can, being able to aggregate a lot of young people to come together and work on the cause, it's a success story for me. I don't count one particular story and say, oh, this is the NGO as a whole is a success story.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and having this
Thank
conversation about life behind bars. It's been such a pleasant conversation that we had here today. Barrister Victor, I'm trying to Izebo.
Yeah.
Izebo, I got it right?
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you so much for having us in the studio. And thank you for listening. It's still Friday. What are you thinking about? What are you going to be doing today? Write your things. I hope the news at 6 comes up at 6. In the interim, let's party a little bit, shall we?